It's the changing of the old guard and changing to a new location. Here's a look at the brand new Mattel Master Universe Masterverse, Master Universe New Eternia, Man-at-Arms. The last thing Duncan remembered was He-Man shouting by the power of Grayskull. Reality cracked and all went dark. Suddenly, Man-at-Arms found himself in New Eternia, one broken and in need of repair. Duncan's been propelled to a brand new planet, and he's already putting himself to work. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the New Eternia Man-at-Arms, I'm going to put myself to work and grab the tape measure to tell you that the figure stands exactly 7 inches in height, or Man-at-Arms is about 18 centimeters tall. As for other figures we can compare him with, let's bring in mostly New Eternia figures. I'm going to say mostly because there's going to be one exception to that. Here's first what he looks like with the most powerful man, and might I also say, one of the worst He-Man figures in the universe. The head sculpts on both Barbarian He-Man aren't very good at all. I did, at the time actually shooting this review, also ordered myself the Battle Armor He-Man from Revolution, which may be my 7-inch stand-in He-Man until we get something better. Yeah, I know. We did get ourselves also a Battle Armor New Eternia He-Man. I didn't like the look of that figure either. Let's bring in the one exception who isn't actually part of New Eternia, but we don't have a 7-inch scale Fisto, so he's going to stand in for right now. Here's also what he looks like with the New Eternian Ram Man. Many faces off to the side here as well. We could also bring in Buzz off. And also, here's what he looks like with Stratos. And of course, if you are going to be comparing Man-at-Arms, it'd probably be also a good idea as well to bring in the original Origins figure so you can see the differences there. I'm sure at the beginning of this video, you did see as I was unpacking Man-at-Arms that off to the side a little compartment had stored inside a little white bag. The white bag is a little bit more interesting than just the hand that came included with Skeletech. Why would Skeletor just come included with that one hand? But Man-at-Arms at least gets 5 extra things. That is a surprise, at least, that when you open up the bag, there's something in there other than just a hand. Still looking at you, Skeletor. Before we actually look at those 5 other things, let's look at this one thing off to the side, his trusty mace. The mace, other than the orb on the end being a different color of orange plastic, I'm not really sure why they chose to have a different orange than everything else that's underneath it. The Werther's original color of caramel that they used here does have quite a lot of marbling. Normally, marbling would be jarring, but because it's also on an accessory, it doesn't bother me as much. On the back of the packaging, by the way, the orb can be shown detached with having a chain connecting the 2 pieces together. This can't be done with just the defaulted mace. So if you're trying to pry this off, you're just going to continue to damage your nails, and you're probably going to damage the plastic in the process. Stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing. And if you thought, hey, wait, I didn't even know there was a bag, look in the packaging before you throw it away, because there is actually an actual mace extra piece that's going to swap it with this whole entire part on the end. Just before doing that, though, I did want to show you that the mace does fit into either one of his hands. Even though he does have close fists with him, generally I like to default my figures on the shelf with 2 gripping hands, because if I ever decide down the road I want to change the figure's configuration and maybe have like the mace on this side, I don't have to then start looking around for where did I put the bag containing Man-at-Arms as extra hands. Don't have to do that, so I'm just going to take the guy off the shelf. So he holds the mace generally quite well. There is also a secondary storage place, if you are familiar like with the Origins, not the classics Man-at-Arms that we also got from Matty Collector. There's a storage space on the back of the figure's body. You can take the mace, you can clip it in place here. Just before I do that, though, I did want to show you guys that this is actually a separate piece from the rest of his armor. Initially thinking by the way it was loose that it was glued in place, but actually you can slide this entire piece off. Now, reasons for why they made this as a removable piece may have also something to do with that, even if you want to display this Man-at-Arms without the extra clip piece on the back and give him kind of more of, again, a just more consistent looking armor. But it could also be, too, that they may be using this armor for a future 7-inch Man-at-Arms or maybe a New Eternian guard down the road. Either way, though, this does fit on just on the back of the figure's body. I mean, if you take these little T-clips on the back, they just slide into the provided grooves. The only thing is, though, every time you remove the mace off of this, you always find yourself kind of moving this a little bit, and then it gets a little loosey and a little wonky, so you can always have to slide it back in place. Anyways, though, you do take the mace, just remove it from his hand. Now, you can either have it obviously a little higher up on the handle, you can flip this around in this way as well, or you can also have it just dead set in the middle. Either way, though, you do have to put a lot of pressure, and when you put the pressure in there, I've done this enough times it doesn't have the snap, but you feel there's a clip, like a little snap piece sound when you are fitting this in place. My only concern with the amount of pressure that's really required to get that in place, not that it's happened yet, but I would worry that down the road this may start to develop fracture marks. Like I said, it hasn't happened yet on the plastic. Like I said, you can also really take the handle if you want to have it a little bit higher up. You can also do that as well. I mean, it looks a little strange that way. Or you can also just detach this. And again, this always is going to be moving around on you. This can also fit a little bit lower down as well. I just kind of prefer to have the mace, if I am going to be displaying it not in Duncan's hands, just to kind of have it clipped more in the middle. And it works fine. It doesn't have any other blasters. I kind of wish the figure could have come included with like a laser pistol or something along those lines. But I'm kind of comparing it also to the original like classics Man-at-Arms that had also these additional accessories. Okay, so we'll put the figure down here for a second. Yes, you probably already noticed he's got a little bit of a looseness there on the tops of his thighs. And like I said, he does come also with this additional piece as well. So basically what it is, it's removing this whole top section up. You're not going to have to remove the orb. You're just going to detach the end of it. It just comes off like that. You can see within this clip, it just fits back into that provided hole. I will say though, like between the two, this fits a lot easier onto the peg. This one I noticed, even though there we go, finally gets it on there. This one you have to put a lot more pressure to kind of get that on place. Now it does have the ball and the chain on the end. This is basically just done by using softer plastic. I think what I might just end up doing is heating this a little bit in hot water and just bending it a little bit. Let it cool. So that usually is what the case. Like if you ever have anything that's warped on a figure, submerge it either in hot water. You can also take a few passes with a hairdryer, just enough to soften up the plastic, get it into the configuration that you want. So I might just have it like something like that and then just let it cool. Am I going to be ruining it? I mean, some people may prefer to have the longer reach chain like this. I kind of prefer it a little bit more curved. The chain is nicely painted, you can see in like a gunmetal gray, and the orb on the end is still a different color than the rest of the mace. There's the inside of the mace, so you guys can see what that looks like. And again, you can also, again, fit this in his hands. I haven't done anything different with the end of the handle, so putting it in his hands would just be as easy as I did the first time. Though it might be a little harder to do it when you start changing out his hands. The figure also comes included with closed fists. These would be the things I would just end up putting back into an extra accessory bag, just because, again, like all the things mentioned already, I'd like to always have the figure with gripping hands as a stock default. So if I ever want to, again, move the weapons around at any point, I don't have to start looking around. Where did I put those extra hands? Where did I put those extra hands? The things that might end up having to go back in that bag, though, is an additional swappable head sculpt. The thing I really like about Mattel, first of all, and I'm just going to slide the figure over here for a second. Not that I normally bring in the packaging, but I want to draw your attention also to the packaging, that the artwork on the front, and more specifically here on the side, doesn't it kind of look like Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York? Did they take some inspirational cues maybe from that? But if you also look at the back of the packaging, if you weren't in the wise and you hadn't already watched a review of it, you probably would just assume that the alternate head sculpt would have the helmet already attached onto it. And that was the thing I thought of too. I thought, oh no, I like the head sculpt with the mustache myself, but I don't really like the helmet that they chose for it. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about here. So we'll just put the extra head down there. We'll put the helmet over here as well. The defaulted head that they gave us here, of course, does sport the mustache, but it does give us a little bit more of a modern head sculpt with the helmet now a little bit more streamlined. Instead of being wider on the sides, it's a little bit more conformed to his head. It has very similar sort of color notations here with some greens and some reds added in there, and the coloring of the blue plastic appears to be the exact same. While I like the modern approach, and they've done this a lot with new Eternia figures, that they usually throw in things that are a nod to the original toy, and then they also throw things kind of like their own spin on what the character could look like, a little bit more modernized. I don't really like the helmet, honestly. And if given really the choice, I would really go back to using the more Origins, more classic-looking head sculpt helmet instead. So I thought, okay, the problem with this is going to be that this head is going to come with this already attached. That's gonna suck, because I don't really want to have the figure displayed with the non-mustached face. It's my personal preference. But Mattel thought of that, and they actually made the helmets as two separate pieces. So the helmet and the head are detached altogether. So even if you wanted to have the figure displayed really without the helmet, you could just leave it off if you want to. The head sculpts, by the way, seem to be exactly the same, in the sense that if I take the helmet off of this one, there we go. You can see like the top of the helmets, or the top of, I guess, what the head guards would be underneath, look to be identical. It's just a difference of really having one with a mustache. If I get my thumb out of the way, one is with a mustache, really one is without a mustache. Really good too, if you also buy more than one of these, you guys can have these displayed really as an Eternian guard, and then one is Man-at-Arms. So like you remove the helmet, and then you can easily then just swap it out with this head sculpt instead, or this helmet instead. Even though it's not the softest of plastics, so I probably would recommend, first of all, heating this in hot water. I've done that, unfortunately, with the old time of me like talking away here on camera. The plastic has cooled. So the problem is going to still be the case. I have removed this a couple of times, and I don't know if you guys can see it or not. Some of the paint, or something has flaked off on the top of the head. You can see there's a little bit of a yellow underneath it. I don't know how many times I would suggest really changing at the helmets, just because it's so close. I mean, like even when you're putting like this head sculpt on, the helmet in place, everything is like so close to the head that every time you remove it, there you go. Every time you remove it, yeah, you can see I've flaked off a little bit of paint there. Changing out the heads, by the way, or changing the helmets, just again, you fit it over top of the ears. And really, of the two helmets, I mean, again, like there's this one here, which again, a little bit more streamlined, or have the one that has the wider sides. I prefer this head sculpt or this helmet sculpt with this helmet, just because it looks more like a classic looking Duncan. I know what you can also do, of course, is if you're not going to be using this helmet, just attach it onto the non-mustached face. And yeah, if you had a second one of these, you could just have the figure displayed as a new Eternian guard. Just move that off to the side. So I do like the idea that Mattel actually gave us two different helmets to work with, and that they weren't committed completely to having those with the faces. So you didn't have to like remove, not liking the non-mustached face, but liking the helmet. Boy, that would be a sucky decision to choose. But I do like the idea again. Yeah, you can swap out the helmets. For the rest of the figure's body, very much more a classic-looking Man-at-Arms. Of course, you got the green undersuit. This seems to be the same body as what they've used already with He-Man. So again, bringing back in He-Man. You can see like the arms, the torso. Yeah, the torso is exactly the same. So is also the case, it seems to be the legs. Obviously, they would have just given him different armor. The armor, of course, he has the front mouth plates, and on the back, we've already looked at the fact that this, yeah, with already the times I've moved the figure around, you can already see how easy this thing comes off. Still, I'm glad it's removable and not glue, because if it was glue and it was kind of like this, I mean, you'd have to kind of pry this off, put the glue back underneath, and just glue it back in place. It is strapped, though, so you can see like the front half of the torso straps across and just attaches in place. If you were to remove this, basically it's just a He-Man body underneath, but we're going to plug that back in place. One thing I really think that's clever is the way they handled the other arm. Man-at-Arms is always plagued with the problem of having like his arm guards sliding off all the time. I don't know how many times I have to keep going back to the Origins Man-at-Arms and sliding that back in place. What they've done, instead of actually strapping this, it's a loop, so they've slid essentially the whole thing over top of his arm, but they very cleverly had made this as a separate piece. I don't know if you can see it or not if I get my hand out of the way. There's a peg right here, so like this part of his forearm guard is actually attached to the rest of his shoulder. So you can see it's attached right there. So they've done it in such a way that there gives you a little bit of posability. This actually has a hinge, and I think that's really smart the way they did that. You got some nice detailing there, of course, with the two swords crossing paths there on the top. That's nicely done in gold. But mostly, it's very classic-looking Man-at-Arms. The only thing that really wasn't classic about it was the thing I already fixed, was the helmet. Again, the helmet is nicely sculpted here as well. Down below, he's got a slightly different loincloth than that of He-Man. It's kind of more like almost like Wonder Woman's skirting, kind of the way they've done that. It's a softer plastic, of course. Underneath that would just be a regular loincloth, nicely painted there in blue. You've got the orb there in the middle of the red, and of course you've got your leg guard down below. All classic looking Man-at-Arms, just again on a larger scale, and it's slightly modernized, and again giving you the option of having two different head sculpts, two different helmets to work with. For the figure's posability, the head is going to rotate on a ball joint. It rotates all the way around, looks up, looks down, and you can also move it back and forth. I thought with how close everything was in quarters that I wouldn't be able to rotate the head all the way around, but you can see they've allotted just enough space. As for the arms, speaking of just enough space, where they've attached the arm here, actually the shoulder pad is further down, so there's nothing really limiting Man-at-Arms from being able to move his arms at 90 degrees. You can take those arms and rotate them all the way around. The only thing I would say is a little bit more restricted is not the swivel here in the bicep, but the double hinge on the elbow. Just really tight, and when you're bending everything, you kind of feel everything sort of folding in on themselves. So, like, you will be able to still bend the elbow, but I just noticed, like, this part of his arm guard kind of just feels like it's crumpling up as I'm doing it. Hands rotate also all the way around. The figure's upper torso is on a ball joint. Yes, the figure does have a swivel down below here. Not to look at Duncan's groin, but just to show you guys, there's the ball joints inside there. And 3/4 of the way up the thigh, there's also swivel cut. So yes, once again, the figure's legs do swivel all the way around. The figure does have a double hinge on the knee, although I have a real hard time to budge this one. It's really super tight. So I'll show you guys on this side. Double hinge on the knee. He's got the swivel here in the top where his boot attaches to the rest of the calf. And then he has the ankle pivot back and forth and an ankle rocker as well. It's a good looking figure, and again, my one biggest concern with getting this guy when I saw images of him first online, I'm not one that tends to check out a lot of other reviews. So for me, I like to really go into these figure reviews when I'm really doing them myself to kind of look at them with my own unbiased opinion, not being kind of swayed by anybody else. So based on that and looking online, I thought only really that the alternate head sculpts were going to have the helmets as part of them. So I thought, oh, that's going to really suck, because I really like the more classic looking helmet. I wish I could have displayed it with the mustache face. And you can. And again, we're just only now going to have an extra piece. So again, like, I probably could just put this in a bag. If I do decide down the road I want to give myself a second Eternia Man-at-Arms, I might then just have the other one displayed, maybe using this head sculpt. Like, this helmet isn't bad. It just, for me, it's not as much Man-at-Arms for me like the classic helmet instead. And I might just display the figure that way. And again, just bringing back in Origins Man-at-Arms, you can see, like, there's a lot of inspirational cues. They've darkened up, of course, a lot of the colors. I don't have the Revelation Man-at-Arms. I really should have gotten around to picking that one up. It was a nice looking figure. It was one of those cases where it went too long and I hadn't yet ordered it. And I thought, well, even if I order it and let's just say I review it, is anybody going to be really all that interested in it? And it just fell at the wayside. I never got around. There's, I think now, a version 2 Man-at-Arms. I might just get around to picking that one up. But like, for me, I'm, of the 7-inch scale at least, I'm kind of more interested in the new Eternia stuff. Just because, again, like, it's more to a throwback of what the original vintage toy is. The Revelation and the Revolution, of course, does take a lot of the cues from the classic costumes, but then they've just done their own spin of it. Man-at-Arms ended up being a nice looking figure, whether you decide you want to display, of course, the figure with the mace with the ball and chain on the end, or if you want to just default it back to the original mace. It's a nice looking figure, and I think Mattel's done a great job on him. As we now move our attention over to the turntable, I've got the new Eternia Man-at-Arms displayed here with the ball and chain version of the mace, which again is a simple switch of just taking the entire top piece off and changing out with the one that comes included in the white little bag. Unfortunately, though, it does add a little bit more heaviness to it. And I've noticed, though, especially with the arms, the shoulders more specifically, that they get a little looser trying to have the mace extended with the arms straight. So I find myself actually bending the elbow just to kind of compensate for the fact that the mace sticks out a little further, having the ball and chain on the end of it. You can also, of course, store the mace on the back of the figure's body, which is one of the only two frustrations I really have with the figure, is that little swinging piece of the back of his torso is always falling on. Not that it falls off, but every time that you're moving the figure around, if you happen just to bang it by accident, you'll find it starts to slide up. I would have preferred the route that they went with rather than actually gluing it. I got to believe that Mattel is probably going to be using this body torso piece again, and that's probably one of the reasons why they made the clip removable. Or they also probably did it as well, that if you just don't want to have the mace storage clip on the back of the figure's body, you just take it off. You're going to be left behind, unfortunately, with these little square peg holes, but if that doesn't bother you at all, you can at least make them a little bit more streamlined. Speaking of streamlining, the only other thing I have concern-wise with the figure is the head sculpts. Both the head sculpts do come included with different versions of the helmet. You can either go with the more modernized new Eternia helmet, or if you like the OG look, like I like the OG look, you can display the figure that way. But with the helmet not being soft or plastic, there is a lot of potential for it to scrape away the paint of the head guard underneath. It isn't going to be such a big problem if you're not going to ever have the figure displayed without the helmet. I have no plans at all of displaying Man-at-Arms without the helmet. But if you're one that likes to remove it from time to time, you may notice a little bit of damage results on the top of the head. So just be careful. Have you guys had the chance yet to pick up the new Eternia Man-at-Arms? Let me know down below in the comments section. While unfortunately, though, distribution still sucks here in Canada when it comes to new Mo2 stuff, luckily I at least found a couple of online Canadian sites where they are now starting to stock some new Master Universe. It's both Origins, New Eternia, and the Revelation. So because of that, we will be looking at a couple of new figures coming up in the upcoming reviews. In the meantime, if you guys certainly enjoyed this video, why not hit it with a like if you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to certainly stick around for more. Like I said, we are going to be looking at some more Master Universe stuff, but we are also going to be looking at a ton of other things. That's the frequency of what ends up happening on the channel. There's just so much content coming on a regular basis. Well, like 2 videos a day, 5 days a week. That's a lot of content to get through. You want to make sure that you're not missing out on any of the stuff that's popping up on a regular basis. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.